Lucky Boys Podcast.
Welcome to Lucky Boys Podcast. I'm Will.
And I'm Norm, and we have two very special guests today. Jennifer Tam, co-founder of the nonprofit Welcome to Chinatown, and Hong Mai, the finance bro who manages all the money for the organization. So I'm super impressed by what you guys are doing. You guys built this from the ground up, and you raised over $140,000 for struggling businesses in Chinatown. That's amazing.
We're actually almost at nearly $500,000 in fundraising.
$500,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So what I'm looking at is the wrong numbers.
it might have been just for one of our initiatives. If that, just let me save you a little bit.
Okay,
so that
that's
might have been
okay.
One initiative.
Yeah. All right. So how many or what type of initiatives does the program, the nonprofit, encompass?
Yeah. So I can give a little bit of context about what Welcome to Chinatown is, just to start us off. We started, my co-founder, Victoria Lee, and I, we started Welcome to Chinatown back in March. We're two Chinatown residents, have lived here for the last 10 years, almost the last 10 years. And it was pretty immediate to us, the impact that xenophobia and then COVID had on the neighborhood. And from there, we were just brainstorming ideas about ways we could give back to the neighborhood, and thus Welcome to Chinatown was born. And our mission is to help small businesses within the neighborhood try to get through these crazy times. And we do this by way of what we think are some pretty cool initiatives that look a little different. But one of the things that got us started was our Feed Our Heroes meal donation program, which is probably where the 140 came from. I think that was...
Yeah.
It was the GoFundMe. I was checking.
I'll look at the finance bro to confirm.
That is correct. and that initiative was the one where we were literally coordinating meals between the Chinatown businesses and receiving and between the frontline workers and the essential businesses and our and the Chinatown businesses. And that one got us a lot of attention, I think, just because of the numbers we were doing. Yeah. And I think at first it was only like five or six volunteers, myself included. They pulled me in. I was doing some of the deliveries on the weekends, actually. So so I know the New York hospital system very well now, guys. And so that one we raised about $175,000 with $156,000 going directly back to the businesses. Yeah. The rest were kind of the delivery expenses and everything like that. But that was a great initiative that ended back in July.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yep. How about the other initiatives that you have planned? Yeah.
So, I think Welcome to Chinatown is unique in that, so for a little bit of context, none of us are from nonprofit backgrounds. Most of us have grown up in kind of corporate America settings. Yeah. I work at Foursquare. I head up their communications.
I'm a senior manager at Ernst & Young doing...
You say that so like bashfully. You can be proud.
She said it so fast. You could almost miss it. I heard I'm a senior manager.
Yeah, you use the technical terms.
Too many technical terms.
And then Vic, she oversees global corporate travel at Estee Lauder companies. So we all come from different professional backgrounds. We are really fortunate that a couple of our volunteers do work in the nonprofit space that have been able to help us set up our foundation. But for the most part, we're just taking what we know through our work experiences and trying to apply it for a small business setting. And so through that, I would say our core competencies, if you will, is marketing with just really wanting to amplify the voices of small business owners and small business workers, the stories that come from within the neighborhood, that are so fascinating and complex. And then the other part of it is through these initiatives where we're looking at ways to engage a wider audience. So inviting people to understand Chinatown the way that we understand it as residents and as Asian Americans. And so, we've done that through things like Greens for Good, which was putting together produce bags for our senior community. You guys know, like, Chinatown has a huge senior population, and they were really left behind as people start to shelter in place, especially for those that required like home assistance and things like that. We have a Made in Chinatown merchandise collection where we have a team of pro bono designers who are giving, free services to design merchandise collections for businesses within the neighborhood. And all those all the profit goes to the business.
And some of the merchandise there, I'll say, has been really picked up by the press. And we've gone recently for the holiday guides. We've been doing Infatuation, I think Time Out,
Eater, GQ.
Yeah.
And this is like all new territory for these businesses, but it's critical at this time, right? Because otherwise, how are people going to know what has happened in Chinatown and the impact that it's, been facing since January of this year?
Yeah. So our head of creative, Harry Trin, he's great, and he's been managing, like Jen said, a group of designers making this merchandise, and that's really given kind of another life, another rebranding almost to some of these businesses. And all the profits from the merchandise sales go directly back into the business.
Yeah.
So it's like a different revenue stream for them almost. And it's just another way of connecting with a different audience than they might have already. So that's probably one of that initiative's been started since May, I think, and it's been ongoing since, and still going now.
That's incredible. Like getting so many people from different backgrounds in corporate to apply those skills into something to help the community. Like, is everyone here in New York City, or is it different parts of the U.S. that they're lending their skills?
Primarily based in New York City, but we do have volunteers out in the West Coast in Los Angeles, volunteers in Chicago, but they are people that have a strong connection to Chinatown, whether they grew up in the neighborhood themselves and have since moved away, or Chinatown for them represents so much of like their identity and their like pockets in the neighborhood that like really speak to their identity and they want to give back. And I think that was a big reason why we started. We knew we wanted to help. We didn't know how to help. And so thus we felt helpless. But then, I don't know, we just like kind of got a group of friends together and we were like, okay, what do we do? All right, I guess I'll just like use the skills that I know at work and try to like communicate that to tell the story about Chinatown, which is like my professional background. For Vic, she's so good at event management, operations, and logistics. So she put together that entire program for Feed Our Heroes. Harry created this beautiful brand that represents Chinatown and is so relatable to so many. And so it was just like everybody throwing in their superpowers and their skill sets. That's why it's a little hard to define what Welcome to Chinatown is. It's a little confusing sometimes, but it's because, we really wanted to take what we know and augment it into the small business setting. And that was the other important thing for us too, is to make sure that, being new to this nonprofit game, we never wanted to come in and tell a business owner what to do. We wanted to partner with them and like make decisions together where it best fits their business and their needs. Because at the end of the day, they know their business the best. We're just here to help support that and, spark conversations about new things to try or things that they can opt into. That was like really core. Is we didn't want to ever make it seem like it was more work for them to do on top of everything they're already going through. So we wanted to make it as simple as like, you can opt into this or that or don't, and we'll find other ways to help you if you want that help.
From feeling powerless to taking action, and then building a coalition of folks that felt the same way and wanted to do something. But with no experience except your professional experience and just what you know so far being here in New York, and wanting to give back to the community during this tough time, what are some additional challenges that you had to face that were totally unexpected?
So when Vic and I were first figuring out what to do, like what was the first initiative we wanted to do, we tried to launch this e-gift card platform. And, like a lot of people were doing that at that time. Buy a gift card from your favorite restaurant, use it for takeout delivery or use it when they're reopened. That quickly failed. Like, why
do you think that is?
The first, because nobody knew who we were. There was like no trust element. And so that was like the secret sauce.
I think getting the businesses to actually trust us.
You said you just started in February of 2020.
Oh, March of 2020.
March of 2020.
Yeah.
So we've only been around for 9 months.
Yeah.
And in 9 months, you raised close to 500,000.
Yeah.
So where was that leap where people started recognizing and then I guess started looking at you like, okay, you know what? You guys seem like the gold standard right now.
I think
This nonprofit, what's
Asian
going
moms
on?
proud everywhere. I would say I think it was because of Feed Our Heroes, and we were getting them this consistent source of revenue, right? And we were kind of taking out the middleman. We were placing the orders, we were picking them up directly, and we were distributing to the hospitals, and they came to trust us that we would, actually execute on this.
Yeah.
And we really committed to financial transparency as well on the GoFundMe, because for Feed Our Heroes, we were relying on donations from the community in order to buy these meals and deliver to the hospitals. And every week we would release exactly which restaurants were getting the money and exactly which portion of it was going to the business and which one was being spent on, let's say, delivery costs. And so I think over time, that went on for 4 or 5 months. I think over time they really started to like trust us in that and making sure. And Vic and Jen, some of these businesses are cash only, so they would actually walk around to these businesses and make sure they settled up every week. And so there was a lot of dedication and commitment. And I think to go back to one of your original questions is what was the challenges? I think we both still have full-time jobs. All the volunteers have full-time jobs. Like no one's doing this as like their primary anything. And so one of the challenges is making sure that I think they saw how hard everyone was working to execute on this program. And I think that's where that trust was building up from, and seeing the dedication.
How did you get the right pieces? Because obviously to be that successful in such a short amount of time and to build the trust in a community that's not known to trust easily.
Yeah.
What did you look for in your team when you were constructing it? Or was it just, hey, I have a group of friends and you have a group of friends? Was it that and you just got super lucky that you got a dope circle? or did you actually look at some people, go, no, you have this superpower, you would be great here, you would be great here? Like, how did that fall into place?
It was a little bit of both. I would say, so through a lot of our day jobs, there's employee resource groups, which are kind of like employee-driven communities, oftentimes based on a commonality. So, for example, Vic, she co-leads the Asian Affinity Group at Estee Lauder. I co-lead an ERG called Formation, which is for employees who identify as people of color. And so you have this entire ERG network of ERG leads across other companies that all are kind of connected. And that's how we found Harry, our head of creative, because he was an ERG lead at his previous company. So it was a little bit of that. But I would also say it was, we went on Instagram. We're like, hey, anybody want to help us help Chinatown?
Oh, that actually worked?
Wait, you DM, you slid in people's DMs.
You slid in DMs? Okay.
We slid in DMs for good. Yeah.
Isn't it always good?
It's for the benefit of mankind. Okay?
There we go.
And womankind.
There we go. And yeah, so that actually worked.
Oh wow.
And we were also part of the Asian Greek system in college, which allowed us to tap into that network too, and especially because a lot of those volunteers also had their own connections to Chinatown. It just became very seamless in that sense. In terms of like figuring out what we were going to do, I think the reason why Feed Our Heroes was also so successful after identifying that challenge of like instilling trust was because of what we were talking about earlier about giving businesses something to opt into that's really easy for them to do. So in the case of Feed Our Heroes, all they were doing were preparing the meals as they normally would. And it became consistent orders. So, as we're making those, paying for the invoices in person, picking up the food to go get it delivered, that's when you start building those relationships with the business owners and they start to open up to you a little bit more.
Yeah, you had conversations with them. It wasn't just a exchange, right?
Yeah.
It was, you come in there, you tell them how many orders, but then you're also talking to them about how their week's been, what challenges they're facing. I think a large part is when you and Vic were doing that, a lot of the conversations that you had with them about the challenges they're facing, what they think they need help with, those were really the building blocks for those relationships. Which
was such a contrast to what we tried to do with the e-gift card platform, because going door to door saying like, in my very broken Cantonese, do you want to sign up onto this e-gift card platform? I want to give you money. Like, and they're like, no.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, it seems like there was a technology component to it where people will be like, you know, we're talking about businesses that have been here for 40 years, and they'll be like, oh, I don't know how to use, you know, whatever you're you're trying to create here.
That was the other thing too, was like the tech adoption was just too great. And, you know, this is something as simple as, I don't want to get on if we suggested to maybe get on Instagram to engage with their audience, they're like, I don't want to do it. I don't know how to use it. And so, you know, in some cases we were even helping them just like do simple things like maintaining a website. But that's really when we were like, okay, let's stop with trying to modernize them when they're not ready. Again, acknowledging that they have other battles to face right now. This is, I don't know, like in April of this year. So really when people were starting to lock down at home and businesses were closing, and like, let's just take a step back and try to make this as easy and seamless as possible for them. We'll take on some of the legwork with operations and managing the finances and everything like that from the donations that are coming in. And so that way it's as seamless as just like, you know, I don't want to call it a transaction because it's not just a transaction, but, you know, putting in those meal orders or being able to cut the check at the end of the month through the merchandise program for some of the featured merchandise, things like that. And that's really where I think we found that sweet spot with the business owners of, okay, like we're not just two strangers, though we kind of were.
Right.
Yeah.
But with
so you
good
learned
intentions.
a lot.
Yeah.
Not only about being a nonprofit, but about these other mom and pop shops in the community. What are some of those things?
So, I mean, at the top line, and obviously this comes to no surprise, but the numbers are real, where businesses are facing up to 50 to 80% loss in revenue from pre-COVID times. I think the thing that is unique to these business owners specifically is the connection that they build into the community, and that realizing that if these businesses close down, the loss is irreversible. The herbal shops that, you know, are sprinkled all throughout the neighborhood, our senior population relies on these businesses to stay open because that is what they are connected to. They grew up using herbal medicine, Eastern medicine practices. If that shop closes, where will they go? Or like who, you know, what herbal specialist is going to be able to tell them, you know, what to pick? It's stuff like that. And, you know, one of our recipients of the Longevity Fund, which is a grant program that we started, told us that if Welcome to Chinatown didn't exist, that was money that, you know, he needed to help with the rent that he was behind on, because obviously there's a lot of rent challenges as well, without having proper bills in place for rent protection or, you know, landlord protection even. For others, it's, you know, they're using the funds to cover utilities, PPE that they have had to build into their operations, things like that. I think, you know, despite all the challenges, everybody still feels really resilient and feels like we will make it through.
Yeah. I think one of the things also is that you with these small businesses, as you start getting to know them, you find out that they're still truly, even though they're suffering, they wanted to give back. Like, for instance, one of the businesses, I think it was, I can't remember the name now, but we pay the full price for meals for Feed Our Heroes. My Food House, thank you. It was for My Food House, and again, we pay full price for all the meals, and he insisted on making us take a discount because he wanted to provide more meals to the frontline workers and the essential workers. And for me, that was pretty, that was such compassion, even though, because again, it's not like his business was doing great or anything like that. Like everyone else, he was suffering, but he insisted on us getting more meals to these workers. And so you see things like that pick up from each business where they're still giving, and they're being so resilient.
Isn't it incredible? I find some of these stories amazing where during these tough times, these business owners, they're finding ways to give back to the community when they barely have anything to give. And everything, just all the pressures and all the stuff that's going on, they're not looking for a handout.
Yes.
Yeah.
They don't have their hands out looking to get something for free or looking to take advantage of anything. They just want an honest living, and they want to help the community thrive.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually the spirit of Chinatown, right? Where, you know, everyone makes these stereotypes about Chinatown meals being cheap or whatnot, but it's low cost because they wanted to offer food to the community at a reasonable cost, right? It's not like they wanted to jack up their prices to make more profits. The heart of Chinatown was always that they wanted to fend for their community. And so I think, and you still see that to this day, and I think that's what makes the community like remarkable in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the last working class neighborhoods in Manhattan, right?
Right.
And the average medium income is, it's, I want to say, I might say this incorrectly. I want to say it's somewhere around like 30,000, 40,000, which is, we're in Manhattan. That's crazy. So that's why you do see prices at that rate, because you have to be able to serve the community that lives there. And you can't be, you know, paying $18 for a meal, or, you know, I selfishly sometimes get the sweet green salads for like $15.
Right. Me too.
Dagger.
Sometimes.
Dagger.
That's like once in a month for me.
I know, right? When I want to treat myself to an overpriced salad.
I just go get some bok choy, you know?
Yeah, from the corner.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
the corner food cart.
Yeah.
Vic was
fruit
cooking
stand.
for herself once, and she literally got 3 small pieces of bok choy, and it was like a ton. And we were.
How do you buy 3 small pieces of bok choy?
You know
The
they
vet-
shrink when you cook them, right?
The vendor let her. Well, she was like, "I'm only feeding myself." And I was like,
Oh, you mean like 3 bushels or just
no,
3
no,
pieces?
she's like 3 small.
They do shrink. That is why.
They shrink a lot.
Yeah.
And I was with Richard, and we were just looking at her like, "What are you doing?" But you know, she was still supporting the small, like the stalls on the side, so it's good. It's good.
But I mean, yeah, it's crazy how much heart these business
Yeah.
owners have despite the trying times. They are still continuing to, and it's not even just you know, people that patron their business. It's also their employees. You know, like we were talking to Grace Young. She's a cookbook author. She wrote this incredible piece at the beginning of the year called Chinatown Needs Your Love More Than Ever. And she did this tour around Chinatown with Jan Lee, who is, I think, like 3rd generation family that's grown up in Chinatown, and he's been a longtime advocate for the neighborhood. They went to a bunch of different places. Anyway, so Grace has been doing a lot of incredible work trying to shed some light onto Chinatown, tapping into her network too of writers, authors, reporters, things like that. She was talking to a business who said that they only opened because they wanted to give their employees work, you know, because these employees have been out of jobs for, at this rate, like what, 6-7 months now. And even though the owner, this is Peking Duck House actually, I just remembered, even though the owner, he's in his 70s, he's still in the kitchen cooking and trying to just like keep the doors open so that way his employees have a salary, have income coming in. That's just, stuff like that is crazy to me. It's like when he could probably at this rate in his 70s retire, he still wants to give back to the people that have been loyal, you know, loyal employees for 15, 20 years or so. And it's incredible.
I mean, I know this during the summertime it did get a little better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it looks like, as of now, it looks like we're heading into another phase of lockdown in certain areas. Do you think we have enough to pull through by the time, I guess, the weather warms up again, or whenever they decide to lift the bans?
I think the businesses will have to get creative about how they do it, and I think that it'll take all of our efforts. But I think there is hope, right?
Yeah.
And we're doing what we can. I mean, longevity fund, I know we didn't speak too much about it yet, but that is kind of our biggest initiative right now. The goal is to give $5,000 microloans to 40 small businesses to help them meet rent and overhead costs. So, you know, that money is what they need to do with it, whatever they think their most challenging need is. And when we first set that goal, I think back in, I want to say August, maybe September, 200,000 sounded like a lot, but we're happy to report we're 75% of the way there.
Yeah.
I think we're like 30 grand away from it. And we've done some disbursements already. So, and you know, if the government never steps up, anything there would help kind of get through the winter months at least. But I think there's hope, but I don't think there is. But it's going to take a lot.
My concern is, I think some will make it, but I'm afraid some
Some
won't.
will not.
Yeah, and we've seen
Yeah,
some
there's
of
like
that.
there's like over 100 Chinatown businesses gone, and
Yeah.
they're not coming back, permanently gone.
Permanently gone.
Not
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
closed for a little.
We were actually just having this conversation the other day of what is success to us as an organization, what's also a failure to us as an organization. And it's if a business closes is like the ultimate failure, especially if it was a business that we were supporting. And it's hard because, we recognize that we've been able to organically fundraise for, these 9 months. However, it requires so much more than just fundraising, which is why that's why we actually started the longevity fund, because we didn't see any programs specific to especially like minority communities, minority businesses, especially high immigrant populations too. They just didn't know what resources were available to them or how to apply for them. And things like PPP, when that came out, the trickle down effect of it reaching these small business owners and how to apply, by the time they're aware of it and then even being able to figure out how to apply for it, those funds are already used up. And that's why we started the longevity fund, because we're like, these businesses need an easy way, like in a language that they can read and understand, with people who understand like what they're looking for, what their needs are, how they contribute to the community. That's why we started the grant. And we're really we've been able to hear so many stories about such a wide variety of businesses in Chinatown and what they do to give back to the community. Whether it's like Imperial Ballroom, they've been a dance ballroom studio for 30 years. The owner, he started it as as a love for ballroom dancing and
It's in the
dancing.
East Broadway.
Yeah. And their first customers, like their first students, from 30 years ago, still go to them to this day, like 30 years later.
Wow.
And that's where they've like met friends, it built community, speaking in Chinese, like to be able to speak that in your native tongue and build community, that's the spirit of Chinatown. And to not have that come back, if they have to close their doors, it's like the irreversible loss.
And so it's definitely it's gonna continue, right? I mean, there's gonna be more businesses that close, and I think we all recognize that, and it's already devastating. But I think what's great about this is that there's also been a lot of community support that's been coming on. So it's not just Welcome to Chinatown, right? There's other initiatives of Asian Americans that are really trying to help Chinatown and support Chinatown. And so hopefully we see a lot, we see more pop up, and we see more people trying to lend a hand.
During this time, this is what I'm hearing constantly. It's the people. It's the people. It's people like you guys. It's the community. Am I missing something? Because where are the elected officials?
Ooh, this is about to get juicy.
The people that were elected to put in office, the so-called leaders.
Yep.
The people that we look to.
Yeah.
And entrust, and we listened to them while they were campaigning. Mm-hmm. and made their pitch on how they were going to help the community. And during times like this, all I see is photo ops.
Yep.
And that's as far as I'm going to keep it real.
Yeah. And, Chinatown is never going to be able to get as much credit as it deserves for everything it has given to New York City. It is a major driver for tourism. If you think about pre-COVID times and the foot traffic that it brought in, it's a historical enclave for Chinese Americans, for Asian Americans. It's incredibly iconic. And so it's been interesting to see the response or lack thereof.
Right. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because they don't look at us as a minority group? That when it comes to things like this, we are considered like white people? I believe there was a state or even some companies, when they look for diversity inclusion, people that look like us are not a part of that goal in terms of diversity or inclusion. Well, you're women, so you would be a part of it. But in general, if they're looking for diversity or people of color, generally there's in colleges, in high schools or even locally around here, and places of work in certain states where they don't consider Asian Americans minorities, which blows my mind.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much to unpack because there's so many layers and like parts about this. I think I guess I'll start with one point where Asians being not seen as minorities. I'm trying to figure out how I want to like construct this, but I think it's because a lot of it in our culture too. We don't like asking for help.
Yep.
We don't like to get handouts, and we don't like to lift up our voices, amplify our own voices of the needs that we need. So I think that's something that we're trying to change as a Welcome to Chinatown organization, where we help give a voice to the people who think that they don't have a voice. I always remember, growing up, my parents were like, just keep your head down, let your work speak for itself, like respect your elders, don't challenge your elders. And I took that approach very seriously into my professional career too. And I realized that that was actually a detriment to how I climbed up the ladder, whatever you want to call that, at work, where I really did have to change my mentality of I should speak up, and I shouldn't be the stereotype that is imposed on Asian women of being quiet and submissive. So that was really empowering for myself as an Asian American woman. And that's why I used that and translated that into the work that I do and what I contribute to for Welcome to Chinatown, because we find so many Asian American or Asian business owners who are like me, who are like, let me just keep my head down and work, and I'm sure I'll pull through. But we actually we shouldn't let our pride get in the way of asking for help. So I think that's one thing. The other thing about, Asians not being seen as minorities, it's complex, right? Because I think we as an organization, for myself specifically, have also been reflecting about allyship in the context of Black Lives Matter. I work at a tech company, and the tech world has its own set of problems about representation, especially for Black, Latinx, or Hispanic or Indigenous employees. And so at the same time, I recognize my own set of privileges as being Asian. And I think that, that's where I think like for Asian Americans, we have different sets of needs and challenges that are different, that we can still set aside and be active allies for Black communities, for Latinx communities, Indigenous communities. So, there's so many layers to it. I don't think there's like a one size fit all answer. And I'm probably rambling at this point.
I think just I don't want to oversimplify, but just look at history, right?
Yeah.
Look at history where Chinese Americans were back in the 1800s, 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
We were lynched.
Yeah.
Chinatowns were destroyed. Chinatown communities were destroyed, by Irish immigrants, because the powers that be, didn't have enough funds to hire Irish immigrants for work. Mm-hmm. And so they went with the cheaper option, the Chinese laborers.
Mm-hmm.
So, and don't forget about the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Chinese Asians,
Exclusion Act. Yeah.
Chinese Exclusion Act, Chinese people were part of the civil rights movement as well. People forget that.
Yeah.
And I think when they say, like, when people have a judgment and say, because the judgment and say like, using this term white adjacent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Chinese are not POCs.
Yeah.
Well, just look at history.
Yeah.
It's been there. It's there. It's written down.
Yeah.
You just have to look.
That's the thing, is like, are we being ignored? Yes, we definitely are. And I don't know why. I wish I knew why. I think it's because of just like the rhetoric that has followed us all the way throughout history. That's why I feel more empowered today to use my voice, use whatever platform I may have to speak of what has actually happened in history and let it be known. We've spent far too long doing ourselves, I think, a disservice of not speaking up more about the things that we have been through as Asian Americans. And I think it's been really inspiring actually to see a lot of it, like when we're going back to your original question, Will, about like the people who are, stepping up and stepping in. I've seen more Asian Americans today who are really trying to elevate that narrative of what it means to be Asian in America.
But I think, and going back to your original question about kind of where are our elected officials, and sometimes I'm curious, is it because they're not making enough noise? Like, do they not have the right networks in the right places to make the, you know what I mean? Like, is there no one important that they're vying for? And it's a great question. Like, that I wish I knew the answer to too. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, are they out of creative ideas? Like, do they not know what to do? And I think this is where the people that are rising up, they're getting creative, right? And they're taking it upon themselves to do stuff. And I wonder if that our elected officials are just missing that sense of motivation, I guess I would say, or just making more noise, because I think they're staying quiet.
Yeah.
And whoever they report to, they're just not making enough noise and being impactful when they should be.
You're absolutely right in the sense of there's just so many layers to it. But part one, we do have to speak up.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, if you want to be heard, you need, in America, at least on this side of the world, the squeaky wheel gets the grease,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I guess in the other side of the world, the nail that sticks out gets the hammer. I mean, we've all heard of that before. As far as the elected officials go, I think one is, does that community's vote matter? Will they swing the numbers? Mm-hmm. What impact will this community have on me?
Yeah.
Yep.
And if the Chinatown community makes up a small percentage of those numbers, then I'm not going to focus on the little fish. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look at my whales. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to focus on my big communities.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to focus my time and energy, because those are the communities that, number one, are probably much louder. And if we don't do what we say, they're going to lash us and go crazy on social media on us. And we don't want that problem.
Yeah.
And those ratings to go down. So we're going to focus on this community.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes down to it, I think that's it. I think that's really it. So I think they're going to think Chinatown's going to be Chinatown. They'll figure it out. They'll be all right. And I think there's this blind optimism from where they stand when they look at us, when they're 10 feet above or wherever in the ivory tower, and they're looking at Chinatown. I think they're just so disconnected from it. And because of that, it makes it hard for them to empathize and engage these problems to them when they're looking at a macro solution. And they may look at Chinatown as perhaps insignificant.
Yeah.
A micro problem.
Yeah. And that's why, man, I wish I knew this sooner, how much I should have been paying more attention to local politics and voting in local elections. I only realized that through Welcome to Chinatown, the work we've been doing, because we realized that there's there is just so much more that can come when you have the right leaders in place. And that's, Vic, she was a poll worker on election day, and she said it was such an incredible thing to see so many first-time Asian voters in their, like mid 40s, 50s, going out to vote, because they recognize, nobody's been paying attention to Chinatown. I'm going to use my voice by my vote to get some attention. And she says it was incredible. She was very emotional about it, because, and I got emotional about it too, because she's like, these are people that are, like my mom, my dad, their age, my grandmother, who she was very close with growing up. And, recognizing it, like to what you were saying, that it was a forgotten community, or it has been a community that's been left behind. And, now's the time to show up.
It is. I think it's a tough reality that I feel not enough of our youth understand.
Yeah.
Their focus is elsewhere. And
TikTok.
And perhaps they may...
Hey, they're catchy snippets, okay?
They may not feel like their future is in this community.
Yeah.
They think maybe they're still here because of their families here, but eventually they'll be moving on, going somewhere else. What I will say is that they will realize how important Chinatown is, for their own personal identity, for every single one of those, whether they're from Chinatown or not.
Yeah.
If they have come across here, if they live in New York, if they live in a city, and they are Asians, it means something. And it does connect you somehow to your roots and your people. I think just from the food, from the culture, from
The language.
It's
the
like,
language.
It's like a piece of home.
Yeah,
You know
it's a
what I
piece of home. And you get to see not only just Chinese people. I mean, there's Vietnamese,
Yep.
there's Korean, there's Thai. I mean, it's all across China. You meet all sorts of different people, and the diversity within this micro community is huge. And to just let history or this virus go down, I mean, people, we're going to remember this.
Yeah.
We're going to remember who did what. And we're going to learn a lot and adapt from this. And when voting season comes, when our numbers come up, this will be in history. And we live in a digital age. Everything's being recorded. So, and we're young, folks like us. So when these young leaders come up and they look to learn about the history, and they look to on whom they want to support, we'll be able to catalog this and say, okay, we'll need this, we'll need that, but not this
Yeah.
and not that.
Yeah.
And that's a great. I mean, it's one of the silver linings of this pandemic is really seeing, because Chinatown was doing fine, going about its merry way essentially before this pandemic hit, right? And even across the country. And then what you realize is when things like this happen, who is there leading, right? And we're finding that there is no one leading. And so I think that's kind of woken people up. And I take that as a silver lining here, and even myself, like just making sure that we stay informed. And it's not just voting every 4 years; it's voting for the local leaders. And it's taken this pandemic to realize that that space up top, even if it was occupied by somebody, but was it the right person?
Yeah. Right.
And that's really shown their true colors in this pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Right? And it's across the United
Yeah,
States.
it's not just
not
here.
just
Yep.
New York City,
Yep.
Chinatown.
Yep.
It is any Asian community throughout, and it's not even in the United States, actually. It's much bigger than that. It's
Yep.
throughout the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you've been paying attention, I mean, you see things happen in Australia. You see injustice happen in the UK. You see things going on in Canada. I mean, just vicious things done to Asian Americans who are innocent. They're just walking.
Yep.
And it's our elders that's, it's folks that are our parents' age that tends to get most of these
Aggressive.
racist acts against them.
Yeah.
Well, that they're the most defenseless, right? Like that's why it's heartbreaking to see and hear all those stories that came
Yeah.
up.
I remember like feeling so scared and worried for my mom and my dad, but especially my mom, because she, is usually doing the grocery shopping by herself.
Yep.
And when all those stories were coming out about helpless, older Asian women in, their 60s, 70s, 80s being attacked, I immediately think of my mom, and I'm like, what if that happened to her? And especially, she's down in Texas, I'm here in New York. I felt so helpless, and I don't want, she's feeling antsy right now, having been stuck home throughout the pandemic. And so she wants to go out to, do her grocery shopping and everything. But I just feel so nervous every time she steps out, because you just don't know what might happen. And, thank God we went through this election cycle and have a new incoming president who will not encourage or entertain any type of attack or attacking rhetoric that Trump has been instilling. And it's so crazy that was allowed. Like that this is like the 4 years that we've been dealing with. Hopefully that means some positive change is coming.
I am hopeful for that, but I don't know if that, I mean, having a president is not going to make the racism go away.
Yeah.
Yep.
100% true.
It may help reduce or to encourage or empower some of these folks, but they're still there in the shadows.
Yeah. Yeah.
They could be our colleagues, our coworkers, and our neighbors.
Yeah.
Or someone that we're just sitting next to.
Right.
And that's worrisome and troublesome in the year, that we're in. It really is troublesome when, I mean, where do we get off? I understand the hate, but where do we get off attacking children elders, women. Like, where do we do that? Like, even the worst criminals, you know, the famous criminals, you could name them all. They had this thing: women and children are off limits, and old people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Leave them alone.
Yeah.
And these people are targeting.
There was a
specific-
code back.
There's no code. These guys are just, it's just so cowardly. It drives me absolutely, like, this is one of the sensitive topics for me. It just drives me. I have no words for it. It's just, I get so emotionally disturbed about, I mean, if I hated someone, I would talk to them directly. I would address my issue with them directly.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is why are you doing it to somebody you don't know?
I just don't understand that level of hate. I don't want to understand it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, but I want it to stop.
Yeah.
And it needs to stop. And how do we stop it? We have to speak up, and we have to fight back.
Yeah.
We have to. It's one of those things where if a bully is constantly taking your lunch money, if you allow it, then you're enabling them to do it every day, and they're just going to get more powerful. I think once you stomp them and you stop them, it's just, that's, we have to set an example throughout. We have to change the narrative that we were taught growing up to just put our heads down, do the work harder than everyone else, and don't worry if someone's bothering you, just
Keep going. Yeah.
The issue is it's like these people they're going after people who can't defend themselves. I mean, we're talking about like us, like younger people. Yeah, we'll stand up. We'll step up, and we'll definitely stop it from spreading in the situation if it happened to us. But it's not happening to people like us. It's happening to mostly elderly people.
If it is happening to people like us, they got like 5, 6, 7 of them against one person.
Yeah.
I mean, that's straight coward stuff. It is straight coward stuff. It is.
Yes.
There's no other way to put it. I mean, they it's like, oh, I got 10 of my boys with me, and I'm just gonna, even though I don't know you, I'm just gonna jump you just for shits and giggles. It's
and the younger generation's been working out, hardcore. Been doing the squats and everything. So I don't want to.
It's all those IG fitness influencers doing the influence. No, but
All those Peloton riders.
not to like go on a complete tangent, but kind of going back to this, the like Asian American experience, especially like Asian males, and the conversation about Asian masculinity. That's like a whole other thing too, about like, why are you jumping this Asian dude? Just like, you think that they're soft? No, they're not. And so that's why, kind of, going back to our original conversation about who are the people showing up and who are the people that are coming out to protect Chinatown. There's like, those self-organized groups like the Chinatown,
groups, I know
Chinatown Block
guys.
Walk, and just trying to diffuse situations to protect, especially like our senior population.
Right.
It's great that people are looking out for each other. And I think that's where some of that hope does come from, about why Chinatown is going to be able to weather through this storm, because you just have people from all walks of life who are coming out to lend a hand to one another.
And I think it goes back to your original statement earlier about like who's showing up during this pandemic, right? And what you say now kind of gets recorded and it'll be remembered. And so I think the people now that are stepping up to help Chinatown, those are the people that would step up against those kind of racist attacks or xenophobia. And then those people staying quiet are the ones you kind of have to ask, like, will they? Like, do you know for sure that if something like that were to happen, they would actually speak up, or will they stay quiet like they historically have been? So
make sure to go vote in your local elections, people.
It shouldn't be like that. My point is that it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
We shouldn't just depend on Asian Americans' high level of productivity, our strong work ethic, et cetera,
Right.
in order to survive, right? Where other communities get an assistance. I just don't get that. I just don't understand how we are minorities as well. We are. That's a fact. That's not even up for debate.
Yeah.
And how this person gets to limp into this college with an 80 and this person with a 90 can't.
Yeah.
When something happens against an Asian American, we can't even get a hate crime group.
Right.
Yeah.
And even when I think, the NYPD ended up creating that anti-Asian hate task force,
Right.
but it's been a little bit of time since I looked at how they organized it, but were those even really serving the right needs? I don't think so.
It's a volunteer group. We
Yeah.
had Sergeant Steve Lee and on the podcast, and he said that it is just a volunteer group. They do not have the same resources as other crime
Right.
units.
So it's like not taking it
Are we not
seriously.
lining the right pockets, do you think? I wonder if that's any, I mean, funding
or-
gets politicians
or
get
we're
elected.
not-
We're just not
is
the
all I'm gonna
political
say.
capital.
We're,
That's
yeah, we
that's
don't
what I'm
have the
saying.
political
I
capital.
think that's I wonder
we
if that's
don't
also
we don't have our MLK. We don't have we just don't have any of. We don't have our Al Sharpton or I mean. I don't know if that's a
But-
good or bad
Makes
thing,
sense.
but
Thanks, Reverend.
Here's the thing, though, is that we don't have those keystone leaders that we can say defined in history has changed the movement for Asian Americans. That's why I feel I don't see myself as an activist, but I see myself. I don't.
No.
They joke because they're like, no, you should. I was like, no, I don't know. Having the word activist feels, I don't know, feels like I'm putting myself on a pedestal that does not exist. But anyway, I think this is an exciting moment for Asian Americans because we are realizing that we don't have that MLK of our history books. We can be that MLK of our history books for Asian Americans. And so I think that's why it's also really important that we make sure we're represented in different industries and different sectors. Hopefully there are more Asian American politicians. That's why Andrew Yang running for president was so inspiring, because even though there were policies that I agreed with and disagreed with, it was a fact that I saw somebody from a community that I can relate to be on a national stage. Incredible.
And hold his own.
he
Yeah.
may run for mayor of New York City.
Man, that would be
Did not hear that.
pretty fun.
He may-
Is that legit?
Yeah, is
Did
that
he-
legit?
did he
or-
actually?
I know. I was
I
like,
know- I
are
know
we
it's-
dropping tea right now?
Because I've heard
I heard.
like
there's just
months
rumors.
ago. Yeah.
There's rumors, but there's been some clues.
serious- ooh.
I don't think he's in Biden's cabinet, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
Which-
he's available.
He's available.
He's
That's
available.
right.
He has some
His-
free time.
His status is open.
I also heard
Ready to
that
mingle.
Single.
Bloomberg would back Andrew Yang if he did put his hat into the ring,
Mm.
which could also be really interesting.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know if Andrew Yang's that cat. I mean, I do appreciate in terms of putting him on the MLK
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah,
I
I'd
just
agree
don't
with
think.
that.
I just.
Well, he's not an
At first, exactly. At first, I was thinking he may be because the way he was speaking and.
Yeah.
But then with this whole coronavirus thing and just the direction that he took, I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah, well,
but
I don't know that it was in Washington Post, right? He wrote that op-ed that he got some shit for.
Oh yeah, that was a while ago. That was yeah.
But the direction that he took, it just, I'm like, all right, that's not MLK.
Yeah.
That's Andrew Yang, and that's
Yeah.
that's fair. I mean, he doesn't have to be MLK. He could be Andrew Yang, and it's all good.
But at least we're seeing some Asians in getting political, right?
Yes.
And building that political capital for us. And so, whether or not we agree with his policies, it's a matter of, hey, at least there's someone doing it. And
Yeah.
at least it's on a national stage, like Jen said.
Yeah.
So
And it's funny because in my household, so I have two older brothers. One took what I guess you would call the pretty traditional Asian route,
STEM job.
lawyer.
lawyer.
Close enough. Close enough.
I was gonna say doctor or engineer.
Yeah, I was not thinking about lawyer. I was thinking
Doctor or
engineer.
lawyer. But actually, yeah, I guess you should throw engineer in there. But then my other brother, he's a chef. And I remember when he told my parents that he wanted to go to culinary school, my mom was like, what the hell?
He's a James Beard Award.
But now he's a James Beard Award
yeah,
winning chef.
in true Asian minor, really. Or,
Yeah, he
true
did
Asian man. He really
overachieve at
overachieved.
the end.
Did I honor you, mother?
And they said, "What's the James Beard Award?"
So the James
It's like the
Beard
Grammys of
of
chefs.
the culinary world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's been on shows with David Chang and stuff before. So
I think they're homies.
yeah, I think they're
My
homies.
understanding is that they are friends.
Yeah, David Chang. He won $1 million.
He won $1
for
million.
the
All that.
nonprofit. Yeah.
Yeah, Southern
Yeah.
Smoke.
Yeah, Southern Smoke. They do incredible work. It was started by this chef in Houston, where I'm from, Chris Shepard, who has been, longtime advocate for the culinary scene in Houston. In Houston, that's probably not the first thing you think of is the food, but our food is incredible in Houston.
Yeah,
And very good.
I've heard good
Yeah.
stuff about Houston.
Well, it took a long time for us to get that, that clout. I say us. I haven't lived there in like 15
No, you
years.
still.
No,
Hey, you have roots there.
Yeah,
Come on.
you're born and raised.
I think
You're
they still
allowed.
consider you a Texan,
You-
right?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You definitely have
I
felt
like
there.
have a lot of inner battles about am I a New Yorker? Am I a Texan?
Why can't
Why
you
can't you be
both?
both? Yeah.
Can I be both?
Yes.
Yeah, you could have a dual passport.
Yeah.
I think
Excellent.
I think you're all right.
I know what happens if Texas.
New York will keep you. Says the other transplant.
I know, right? But yeah. So Chris Shepard, he started this nonprofit called Southern Smoke. Originally, it started as a way to help cover medical expenses for somebody who worked in the hospitality industry in Houston. Who I think they got into a pretty bad accident, but working in hospitality to cover the medical bills is a big challenge. And so the community pulled together to help fundraise. Today, it has expanded into an emergency relief fund for restaurant hospitality workers who've been laid off because of COVID. So David Chang was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. He was the first celebrity to win the $1 million, and he donated to Southern Smoke. So pretty
Incredible.
pretty cool. And I mean, that was cool to see an Asian dude win Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and be the only celebrity. Maybe this is where the stereotype comes in.
I was just gonna say, am I overdoing it if I say it again? Did I bring it on to her mother?
Yeah.
I mean, $1 million.
Yeah. But it's so cool to see, representation from that perspective. And I know he's kind of like at this level of celebrity, but he is bringing visibility into Asian cuisine. Which is important.
Southern Smoke's cause is great, right? Because it's for the employees of the restaurant.
Yeah.
It's not even, because especially this pandemic has displaced a lot of workers there. So it's a great cause, and to get visibility into that issue.
Yeah.
I think that was a great thing he did.
They're doing incredible stuff. Yeah. And I mean, so, going back to the topic about like representation, I think that's actually kind of what powers a lot of the momentum for myself. I think it is the same for Vic, is like, Asian American women trying to use our, our experiences and our professional backgrounds and trying to contribute it back to the community. It has been very, very empowering to go through this experience for myself, to understand my identity. We jokingly say like we've never felt more Asian before.
In a good way.
In a good way.
In a
Yes.
great way.
Yeah, in a great way. Yeah.
No, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I mean, with all of this, I mean, you guys may not be on a lot of folks' radar still. And
Yeah, that's very possible. Yeah.
I mean, you guys are still very new. You haven't even been doing this for a year yet. I can't imagine, as with time goes by, we see exponential gains to your cause. And I know that if you built this much traction in such a short amount of time, I can't, I see great things ahead. And I want people to know that you can make a difference. You guys are a perfect example of that.
Thank you.
How you just started something where you felt helpless. I think there's so many of us that, and I'm one of them. I've gone through this in my head, like, I'm only one person. What can I do?
Yeah.
I played that in my head, and then I get into this position where I'm having this inner dialogue stripping away of my power. And this is what I want people to know, is that you are very powerful.
Yeah.
And us together as a community, I mean, we may be small in their minds, but us, if we band together as a community, we are extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And if we raise our voices, we can be heard. That's how it starts. It's that one person that says, no, you know what? I am one person and I can make that difference.
Yeah.
We have to change the way we speak to ourselves.
Yeah, you got to be the spark,
Yeah, I mean, the imposter syndrome does feel so real. So a lot of times, admittedly, but when you can see now we're starting to see a lot of the outcomes of what we've been working on for the last, several months. Yeah. And that's when you can like take a step back and say, oh shit, I did this.
Yeah. And then when you start, we were talking about doing kind of an annual report to kind of talk about how many businesses have been impacted.
Yeah.
But those numbers are nice. But then when you actually talk to the businesses, I
Yeah.
think that's
Oh, that's the best part.
I think that's the most rewarding part is just hearing what the businesses are saying.
Yeah.
When we send them an email saying, you know, we've selected you for a grant, they're so grateful, right? And again, it's not people asking for a handout; they
Yeah.
deserve it. And it's just, I think that's when you find it the most rewarding.
That's really the best part is
Yeah.
like, it's not the receiving of like the gratification of the work, but it's just knowing that you helped them in a way that was meaningful to them, and that they can continue to do what they've been loving to do for all these years. And you know, I guess in a sort of selfish way, these are businesses that we also patronize ourselves, and so it's like, these are the places that we love to go to, and we want their doors to stay open.
Like, we get so excited when the merchandise comes out. We're like, shit, do we really need another tote bag? But it's just
Yes.
So many tote
I
bags.
have like
Tote
20.
life.
I have 20.
or like, do we need another
I know,
mug? But
yeah.
it's just like, you know, these are the businesses that we patron. So it's
Tote life for life.
And you're also inspiring other like causes too. I mean, like, I'm participating in the Run for Chinatown
Yeah.
tomorrow, and that was sparked by, you know,
By
what you guys are
Leland,
doing.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Leland, you know, he was a guest, and he
Yep.
said that he was he was inspired by what you guys were doing, and he wanted to do something. He felt helpless as well, and he wanted to do something to help the community, but he didn't know what.
Right.
I mean, and he
look
said,
at
like,
him
I love
taking
running.
his
And
superpower.
his superpower of running.
Yeah, his superpower
You
is
know,
running.
run for 12 hours.
He runs an 8-mile minute.
That's
That's
crazy.
incredible.
My
He-
mind was blown when he was doing that. Like,
Let me tell you something. I was in a Chinese restaurant ordering a cup of coffee, and I hear this voice, and I turn around, and it's like, this voice is so familiar. And I turn around, it's Leland.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and this was, I think, at noon. And he said, I ran 20 miles. I
Real-
ran all the way to the West Side Highway uptown, and I just came back to Chinatown to have lunch with my friend. I'm
Real casual.
You look like you can run in a 20 miles. So, I mean, like,
didn't he run like 70 total?
61 miles.
yeah. So his goal for this
Yeah.
one is 70 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're doing 20 miles of that with him? Is that what your goal is?
My goal is 20 miles,
Hey,
but
there,
you know,
you
got
got your
this.
superpower
You
too, don't
got
you
this
worry.
I've
one.
never ran a marathon. You know, so I'm trying.
That's about 15 miles better than me.
yeah.
It's like
That's
19
amazing.
more miles.
It's fine. It's fine.
Hey, it's all
fine.
for, you know, it's all for a good cause and for the
Yeah.
community. So
Yeah.
I'll put my body in risk. I don't care.
No,
There you
it's
go.
great that you guys are doing that. But even like, again, things like that's just like come
Right.
out of the woodwork, and it's so cool to see. So we're at 45 volunteers now, right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy to see everyone's different skill sets come together for this.
Yeah.
Like, we got designers, we got people who project manage, we've got communications,
Illustrators.
finance. It's so cool to see outside of our day jobs,
Yeah.
right? Because I do sit in front of a computer most days, and you know, I engage with my clients, but it's so cool to see Harry put together something from his idea onto his computer and actually print a product in life, right?
Yeah.
And seeing some of the stuff that you come up with when it comes to copy and doing marketing,
Yeah.
all that stuff is so
Hey,
cool.
numbers are important too.
No, hey, I'm in the background, and I don't mind. Just leave me alone with my Excel sheet. I'll be happy.
You guys have great leadership qualities. I mean, now it makes sense to me. I'm like, how the hell did they gain so much momentum in such a short amount of time and build such a great team of very capable people with real superpowers to contribute,
Yeah.
and just do it with extreme proficiency. And it's just, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed. And that,
Thank you.
you know, it starts, you know, up top.
Yeah.
And it trickles all the way across and up and down. So that, I mean, that's my hat's off to you ladies. You guys are definitely setting the tone, setting the bar, and I can't wait to see what you guys do.